Hi everyone, my name's Sally Buchanan Hagan. First of all, I want to start by thanking people for having me here today. I'm very honoured and grateful to be able to present this webinar. So just to give you a bit of a background about me and what I do, I am a registered nurse, and I work in the emergency department, but I also work in the education and research side of things. So I am a casual academic at a university, and what I do there is I teach undergraduate nursing students, and one of the units I have taught in and do teach in is mental health nursing. I am also a consumer academic at another university, and my role there is a little bit different because though I do work with nurses, I bring the consumer knowledge to the role when developing educational content and resources for mental health nurses. And I also deliver education to mental health nurses using my lived experience of mental illness. I work in research too. I'm a research assistant, and in the past I've worked on research projects to do with mental health and nursing. I volunteer, so I blog for the International Bipolar Foundation, and I am also a youth presenter for an organisation here in Australia. So my role is to go out to high schools and educate high school students about mood disorders and mental health, but also to educate teachers about mood disorders in young people. So whilst I don't have a degree in psychology, I'm not a psychiatrist. I do work in the education and research side of things to do with mental health and mental illness. And I also have bipolar type 1 disorder. So today I'm talking about psychotic mania, and I'll be sharing some of my experiences of psychotic mania. And I chose to speak about psychotic mania because I find psychosis quite interesting. And I titled my presentation Psychotic Mania, the Dark Side of Being Up, because I think in the general population there's this perception that mania can be fun and that it's a mood state that people seek out. And whilst in my experience there are some enjoyable sides to mania, mania is nothing to be desired. It can be very dangerous, it can be very damaging, and in extreme cases, people can become psychotic. And to me, that is the real dark side of mania. So before I jump in and talk about my experience with psychotic mania, I've been psychotically manic twice. I just want to go into a little bit about what psychosis is, to place my experience into a bit of context. And I'm sure people will already know this information, but it's just good to have a bit of a refresher. So psychosis is not a mental illness. It isn't a medical diagnosis, but rather it is a term used to describe a set of psychiatric symptoms. And it can be caused by many things. It can be caused by physical illness, injury to the brain, substances. It can be caused by stress, and it can also be caused by mental illness. And one of those mental illnesses is bipolar disorder. So when we're looking at specific signs and symptoms of psychosis, we have three categories. So we have hallucinations, delusions, and thought disorders. So hallucinations are when someone experiences something in any of their five senses with the lack of external stimuli. So for example, we have auditory hallucinations, which are very common. They're a common type of hallucination, and that's where someone will hear something that isn't there. You'll often hear people describing this experience as hearing disembodied voices. We have visual hallucinations, which are when people see things that aren't there, and then we have hallucinations in our other senses. Delusions are when someone has a fixed false belief that no matter how hard someone tries, they can't persuade that person to see otherwise. And there are many different types of delusions a person can experience, but when we're looking at mania in particular, very, very common delusions are grandiose delusions, where someone has an inflated sense of self-esteem. And another very common and general type of delusion is persecutory delusions, and that's where people believe others are out to harm them. And thought disorders are basically disorganized thinking. Again, we can have many different types of thought disorders, and I myself can definitely identify times in my life where my thinking has been disordered due to mania and psychosis. And again, if we're looking at mania in particular, we have that flight of ideas, that pressured speech, which is indicative of racing thoughts. We also can sometimes get clanging, which is where people rhyme words with no logical connection. We can't observe thought disorders. Thought disorders are something that we actually see in people's speech. They manifest in speech. And I want to point out that people don't need to have all three of these categories of symptoms. They don't need to have hallucinations, delusions, and thought disorders to be classified as having a psychotic experience. Some people may only experience delusions. So if we're looking at psychosis in bipolar disorder, to begin with, I want to make it very clear that not everybody who has bipolar will experience psychosis. A few years ago, I was giving a presentation to a group of high school teachers, and I shared a psychotic experience. And at the end of that presentation, a woman came up to me and she disclosed that her son had recently been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and she was concerned that he would experience psychosis somewhere along the line. So after that instance, I've always made it a point to make it clear that not everybody who has bipolar will experience psychosis. People can experience psychosis in severe mood episodes. So psychosis can occur in severe episodes of depression. So for both bipolar type 1 and bipolar type 2. And psychosis can occur in severe episodes of mania. So with bipolar type 1. So my experience with psychotic mania. 7 years ago, when I was sitting in my mental health nursing class as an undergraduate student learning about psychosis, never would I have fathomed that only within a few years I would be experiencing psychosis myself. But I count myself really lucky because I had my first manic psychotic episode 3 years ago when I was 23. And prior to that point, I had been diagnosed with bipolar type 2 disorder, and I'd been hospitalised for that. So I was heavily involved in the mental health system to begin with. I was seeing my psychiatrist weekly. I think I had 2 psychologists at that point, and I was seeing them weekly. My family and friends were all aware. So when my hypomania escalated into mania, and then when that mania escalated into psychosis, everybody was aware of what was happening. People picked up on the signs really quickly, and that meant that I could be treated quickly and I could be kept safe. I often get asked, how does the psychosis begin? And I think that's a really good question, and I don't really have a good answer, because when you are manic, everything's going so quickly, your thoughts are going so fast, your experiences are flashing by you that you can't really get a hold of a thought and pin it down and commit it to memory. But what I do remember in both instances is that the psychosis happened quite suddenly. And I will point out that these pictures on the slides are pictures that I've done whilst manic and psychotic, and the current one on the slide is a self-portrait that I did some years ago. So yeah, the psychosis happened quite quickly, like within a blink of an eye, really. The first episode I had visual hallucinations. So the blue sky suddenly turned this techni-colour rainbow. I was seeing these golden dots in the sky that I thought were atoms, and I thought I was a genius for seeing such a small thing. This ghost-like figure of a man followed me around, and I thought he was my guardian angel. So in the beginning, this actually wasn't scary. All of this just reconfirmed my belief that I was more special than everybody else. And I thought I was in a dream, and I controlled the dream, therefore I controlled the world. So it was quite wondrous, and it was quite magical. I felt super confident and quite carefree. But as is the way with mania, there's a turning point where things go too fast, it's confusing, it's scary, you feel out of control, you don't know what's happening, the euphoria dries up, you become irritable, and with that shift, the psychosis also shifts, and it turns into quite a horrible and bad experience. And the night before I was admitted into hospital, for that first time. I had locked myself in my wardrobe because the hallucination of the man had turned menacing. And I was hospitalised for 2 months. And needless to say, I was re-diagnosed with bipolar type 1 disorder. And that picture on the slide I drew in hospital, and though it's quite simple, I think it's quite a nice summation of how psychosis can be really isolating, and how you're just sort of confronted with this blackness and this void of unknowingness. And so the second time I was psychotically manic, it began much the same way. I was having visual hallucinations. I thought I could see people's auras, and based on their aura, I thought I could diagnose them or make a decision about their character. And I also had auditory hallucinations too. So I heard a voice that told me I could fly. I thought I had special powers, and I was going to prove that I could fly by jumping off the bluff near our house. So luckily I was taken into hospital before I got to the bluff. And again, in the beginning, it was quite magical and I felt on top of the world. But when I was in hospital, the psychosis changed. It was really confusing and scary and so on. So what happened? How did I get that far into mania that I became really, really psychotic and really unwell? Well, in both instances, I stopped taking my medication. And I know for some people who have bipolar, medication can actually be detrimental for them, or people can manage their health quite effectively without needing to take medication. So I don't advocate for or against medication. But for me at this point in my life, it's something that I need. And I want to make it clear that stopping my medication was not a rational decision on my part. I was already quite hypomanic at that time. I didn't believe I had bipolar. So if you don't think you have a medical condition, why would you take medication for it? And very soon after stopping my medication, I did become very unwell and I became psychotic. And for both instances, I was taken into hospital and I was restarted on my medication. And very soon after restarting, the psychosis cleared up and my mood gradually came back down to baseline. And usually people who are experiencing psychotic mania will be taken into hospital because it can be quite dangerous for the individual, because there is that lack of judgment. And there's also the risk of damaging reputation as well. So both times when recovering from my manic episodes, I've been quite embarrassed about the things I've said or done. And it really does feel like somebody else took over for that time in my life. And I was in hospital for both times about 2 months or so. And I get asked a lot, what do I do now to prevent psychosis? And my last psychotic episode was 18 months ago. And my answer is I just do a lot of the things health professionals tell you to do. So I have a medication routine. I get enough sleep. And if I know that I'm not going to be getting a good night's sleep, then I make time to compensate for that and catch up. I eat well and I exercise. And I have bipolar with seasonal patterns. So I know that in spring and summer, I will be hypomanic. So I need to add additional medications to prevent the hypomania from escalating into mania. I usually try to finish my presentations with a lesson that bipolar has taught me. And there are many lessons, but I'll end this presentation by sharing a lesson that psychosis has taught me. Psychosis in Western society and Western cultures is heavily stigmatized. And it's because of that people don't want to talk about it, which is a shame, because the more we talk about something, the more we understand it. And the more we understand something, the less stigma there is around it. And with a decrease in stigma, we see increase in empathy towards each other. But the fact is, psychosis is scary. And I think that's something that we need to acknowledge if we are going to have these conversations. And it's scary for everybody involved. But as someone who's been on both sides of the fence, working as a nurse in the emergency department, I've cared for a lot of people who have been experiencing psychosis. But as someone who has also experienced psychosis, I can say that being on that side is a lot more scary. And when I have been on that side of the fence, when I have been in those dark places, all I've wanted is someone to ask if I'm okay, or how I'm going, or what I'm experiencing, or if I need help. And if I need help, what help do I need? And also just someone to sit with me in the silence and share that space with me without judging me for what's going on. And there's this great quote that I love, and I don't know who said it, and it's a simple one. And it's, don't be judgmental, be curious. And that is what psychosis has taught me. It's taught me not to be judgmental of others. It's taught me not to shut down people because they don't believe the same things I do, or they don't have my opinions, share my opinions, or share my point of view. And it's taught me not to discount or ignore people who are doing something that's outside of the norm, or something that's a bit different to ordinary. But instead, it's taught me to be curious and to ask questions to get a better understanding of the person who you're talking to. And to get a better understanding of them and what they're interested in and what makes them as a person. And to do so without judging them, and for seeing the person that they really are without the superficial things that go on. And that's what psychosis has taught me, and I'll be forever grateful for that lesson. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you found it useful. Thanks.